Hi everyone, and welcome back to Cardiac Radio for Teens. For those of you who don't know, I'm Bia, and Cardiac Radio for Teens is a place where teens can come together with other teens to learn about spiritist teachings and topics in a way that can be more relatable to us and make more sense to us as teenagers in today's society. The Spirits book, written by Allan Kardec, covers the basic topics of Spiritism, and then in other books he goes into more details about them and into other specific topics. But this is kind of a general overview, and how he did it was he composed questions and then he asked the spirits and they answered him. And of course it was more complicated than that, but to sum it up, that's what happened. So then these high order spirits, they came to give us his teachings, and they explained this stuff to him and helped him write this book so that we could know the knowledge that the spirits gave him. And so we've been going through the questions, and this book has 1,000 questions, and we're already in the 600s. So we've come a long way reading this book, and we've gone through various topics, and we still have many more to go. So for the past few weeks, we've been talking about the kingdoms, the 3 kingdoms, and we talked about how sometimes you can split them up into 4. There's different ways you can divide them. And we also talked specifically about sections, like we talked about plants for a while, and then we talked about animals, and now we left off talking about humans. So that's where we'll continue today. So question 609. Having entered the period of humanness, does a spirit retain traces of what it has previously been? That is, of the state in which it found itself in the period that could be called non-human? So last week we talked about how there is this time when the spirits, it's like not a spirit yet. There's a little before time when the spirit was becoming into being. So there's like this before time, like let's say like birth and childhood, even though it's not really like that, or like birth and like being an infant. And there's kind of like that for the spirit, and then they actually become a spirit. So now they're saying, so now they actually have this humanness. Do they have any traces of that time before? And the spirits answered, that depends on the distance separating the 2 periods and the progress it has accomplished. For a few generations, it may preserve a more or less pronounced reflection of the primitive state, for nothing in nature occurs through an abrupt transition. There are always links connecting the ends of the chains of being or events. However, such traces disappear with the development of free will. The first step of progress are accomplished slowly because they are not yet aided by the will, but they follow a more rapid process as the spirit acquires a more perfect consciousness of itself. So, yeah, it depends so if you have like traces of it, so like, can you still see that you were primitive? Do you still have some of these like primitive instincts or something like that? And they're saying that yes, if you're not that evolved yet, and the closer you are to that state, so maybe you've only reincarnated twice since then you will still have traces. But then the more you go evolving, that kind of like the older you get, then you learn more things, and then you have less traces of those things. So it's kind of like while you're closer to that time, you remember it and you have influences of it more. But the further you move away from that time, you get more and more away from those primitive things. Question 610. Then are the spirits who have said that humans are beings apart in the order of creation mistaken? So then they're saying, so some people think that humans don't go through this like order of creation and stuff. So they're saying, are they wrong? And the spirits answered, no, but the issue has not been fully developed, and there are many things that only come in their time. Humans are in fact being apart, for they have faculties that distinguish them from all others, and they have another destiny. The human species is the one God has chosen for incarnation of the beings who can know God. So here they're saying that we kind of haven't developed and worked enough or thought enough about this question and this topic, but humans are apart from everything else. It's not like it's just the animals and the plants. There is something special to us because God, like it says here, God chose us to be the ones to incarnate with the beings, like our spirits, the beings who can know God. And we talked about that was a big difference. Like the plants, they didn't even have any sort of intelligence, but the animals, they have primitive intelligence, but they aren't able to have this notion of God. So we are chosen to have a notion of God, and that's really important, and that does set us apart from, let's say, just animals or plants. So now we get to the next part, which is titled metempsychosis. So I went and looked up the definition of this word just in like the normal dictionary, and it says the supposed transmission at death of the soul of a human being or animal into a new body of the same or different species. So they're saying so basically they're talking about like disincarnating and reincarnating, like we talked about, like how the soul is going to leave the body and then how it's going to go into another body, eventually reincarnate. But here, especially in that definition, what it gets a little interesting is the question of if it can be into a different species or not. And we'll see what they said. So, question 611. Isn't the common origin of living beings in the intelligent principle an affirmation of the doctrine of metempsychosis? So here they're saying, so living beings have a common origin. So does that kind of show us that, yeah, so we all kind of start from the same place, and then we when we incarnate, then we go into a new body. So they're kind of, so can we, is this affirming that? And the spirits answered, two things may have the same origin and yet not resemble each other at all later on. Who would recognize the trees, its leaves, its flowers, and its fruits in the same shapeless germ container in the seed from which they came? From the moment when the intelligent principle reaches the necessary degree for becoming a spirit and for entering the period of humanness, it has no more relationship with its primitive state. It is no longer the soul of the animal, like a tree is no longer a seed. In humans, there is only the animal-like body, the passion that arises from the body's influence, and the instinct of self-preservation inherent from matter. Therefore, one cannot state that such and such a person is the incarnation of such and such an animal. Consequently, metempsychosis, as commonly understood, is incorrect. So what they're saying here is that, okay, although we have the same origin, although we went through the same thing, we started at the same thing, that doesn't mean it's the same thing. Just like a tree. The tree starts in the seed, but there's the tree, there's the branches, there's the leaves, there's the flowers. They aren't all the same thing just because they came from the same seed. And so they're saying that's the same thing, and they're saying so this metempsychosis, as it's commonly understood, is incorrect because a human is not going to incarnate into an animal's body, or vice versa. An animal's not going to incarnate into a human body. So that's why this concept is incorrect, because it's not going to switch species. And here they bring up a good point that, yes, we have, like, animal-like tendencies, let's say. Like, we have our instincts to preserve ourselves, to keep ourselves warm, to keep ourselves fed, but that is just because of the way our body, our material body is, not about how our spirit is. Question 612. Could a spirit that has animated a human body incarnate in an animal? So if a spirit is, like, say right now, I'm in a human body. In my next incarnation, can I go into an animal body? And the spirits answered, that would be a regression, and a spirit does not regress. The river does not flow back to its source. So, like we know, like we've mentioned before, like we're going up a ladder or stairs. We're working up and up and up, and we want to get to the top to perfection. And as we're working up, maybe it takes us a long time to overcome something. So maybe we have to stay at the same step for a long time because we're not moving. But we're never going to go backwards. We're never going to unlearn something or regress. And that's the same thing. If I was to go back into an animal body right now, then I would be regressing because I have more information and more knowledge than that of an animal. So that wouldn't make sense for me to go back there. And then, like they said, the river does not flow back to its source. So the river leaves from the source, but it doesn't flow back. So you don't have to go backwards there just because we came from once that spirit of the animal kind of evolve to that state, and then just because we have the same origins doesn't mean that we would go back to that. Question 613. However erroneous may be the idea linked to metempsychosis, couldn't it be a result of the intuitive sentiment of the different existence of an individual? So what they're saying here is that, okay, even though it's like not completely correct, the metempsychosis, because of this different species, couldn't it just because of this like intuitive, like this thing that, like this feeling in the back of your head that you've had like other lives and that stuff, and you've like seen stuff of this stuff before, so doesn't it kind of make sense for this intuitive sentiment? And the spirits answered, we recognize such an intuitive sentiment in this belief as in many others, but like most intuitive ideas, humans have perverted it. So they said, yeah, we recognize this intuitive sentiment, like you're like thinking in the right direction basically, and this is a belief that a lot of people have, but we also kind of distorted it and we messed it up, and so it's not completely correct. So yeah, there was like some good things that we were thinking and we were like getting on the right track, but then we kind of messed it up and kind of changed the way it actually is. And then Allan Kardec puts his own comment in, which goes on for a while, so we'll split it up and talk about it in pieces. Metempsychosis would be correct if one understood it to mean the progress of the soul from a lower to a higher state, accomplishing the development that will transform its nature. So, if we're talking about metempsychosis, one way that it is correct is if we're talking about it that you're moving up, that you're going from a lower to a higher state. So maybe some people that think that's going from an animal to a human and then progressing as a human. But the problem comes in when we're thinking we're going the other way, because we know we're not going from a human to the animal. But it is correct when we're talking about going from a low state to a higher state. And then he continues, however, it is erroneous in the meaning of direct transmission from the animal to the human and vice versa, which would imply the idea of regression or fusion. So here they're saying, however, it's not right to think that we're going directly like animal, human, human, animal. And then, so they continue. And since such fusion is not possible between corporeal beings of two species, we have an indication of their beings of degrees that cannot assimilate each other, and the same must apply to the spirits that animate them. If the same spirit could animate them alternatively, it would result in identity of nature, and this would translate into possibility of material reproduction. On the contrary, the reincarnation taught by the spirits is founded upon the evolutionary march of nature and the progress of humans within their own species, which in no way diminishes their dignity. What degrades them is the bad use they make of the faculties God has given them for their advancement. Be what it may, the antiquity and universality of the doctrine of metempsychosis, and the number of eminent individuals who have professed it, proves that the principle of reincarnation has its root in nature itself. These are arguments in favor rather than against it, however. So here they're just kind of explaining, he was just kind of explaining again how it wouldn't be possible to be going from animal to human, human to animal, just back and forth all the time, because that means that we would kind of be at the same level if it was that easy to switch, because we know that our bodies were made for the kind of intelligence and the level that we are at. And the animal's body was made for the intelligence that they are at, and it's not interchangeable as some people think. So they're saying that would be a problem, but it's not completely wrong in just believing that you're going from a lower to a higher state, but then it just kind of got a little messed up, a little bumpy along the way when people believe that. But if we just stick to, we're going from a lower to higher state throughout humans doing that. So yes, we are progressing and we are reincarnating and we are evolving, but we're doing that amongst our species, not different ones. Then he continues, the point of departure of a spirit is one of those issues that are connected to the origin of things and that are among the secrets of God. It has not been given to humans to know them completely and regard them, but they can only form a mere supposition, constructing more or less probable theoretical systems. The spirits themselves are far from knowing anything, and regardless what they do not know, they may also have their own opinions that are more sensible and less so. So they're saying, so the point of departure of a spirit is, it's still one of those secrets that God keeps that we're not ready to learn about yet. So we don't have all that information. And so right now, people have some theories and people have some educated guesses of what it's happening, but no one really knows for sure because we're not at that stage to know yet. But of course, some people have some theories, and these theories are on the right track, and then of course our own opinions, because we're humans and we do that, and our own opinions come into play, and which isn't always terrible, but sometimes could affect the way that people are thinking this. So we don't exactly know the point of departure of a spirit because that's kind of still a secret that we're not able to know yet. And then he continues. It is thus that all do not think in the same way regarding the connection between humans and animals. According to some, a spirit only arrives at the human period after being prepared and individualized in the different degrees of the lower order beings of creation. According to others, the human spirit would have always belonged to the human race, without having passed through any animal experience. The first of these theories has the advantage of giving an aim to the future of animals, which would thus comprise the first link of the chain of thinking beings. The second is more in conformance with the dignity of the human beings, and may be summed up as follows. So here he's giving, some people think that different ways that people think, he's saying. And he said how some people regard this connection between humans and animals in different ways. And these different ways may have valid points to them, but maybe some things are where personal opinion came in, but some parts are valid. And he's saying, so some people think that the spirit arrives at the human period after going through lower order. So you went through the animals, you've progressed, and then, okay, finally you got to be able to be in the human state. And the other ones think that we just started at the human state. We didn't start at all these animals. And then he said that the second is more in conformance with the dignity of the humans and may be summed up as follows. The different species of animals do not proceed intellectually from one another by way of evolution. Thus, the spirit of the oyster does not subsequently become that of the fish, the bird, the quadruped, and then the biped. Each species is an absolute type in itself, physically and mentally, and each of its individuals draws from the universal source that quantifies the intelligent principle that it needs, according to the performance of its organs and the work it must perform in the phenomena of nature. It then returns to the general mass at death. Those worlds more advanced than ours are also comprised of distinct species of animals that are appropriate to the needs of those worlds and to the degree of advancement of the humans they serve. But they do not proceed from those of the earth, spiritually speaking. So let's break up that part before we continue. So they're saying that, so the spirit, you're going to intellectually evolve, but it doesn't mean you have to go through every type of animal. So it's not like, oh, right now you have to go to being an oyster, and then you have to go to being a fish, and then you have to go to being a bird. It's not like that. Each animal is its own thing. Each animal is its own species in and of itself that has to perform its own different thing. So you don't have to go through all of those things like that. And then they're saying, on more advanced worlds, they do have more advanced animals to meet the needs of those spirits, those humans incarnated. So they have more advanced spirits they have more advanced animals, but still, their more advanced animals are still at a lower level than humans, let's say, on Earth. So animals are still, even the highest order animals are still lower than the lowest human level, let's say. And then it continues. It is not the same with human beings, however. From the physical point of view, human beings are obviously a link in the chain of living beings. But from the moral point of view, there is a break in continuity between humans and animals. So they're saying, now we're talking about the different animals, but when we put humans into the picture, humans are different from this general category of animals. Only human beings possess a soul or spirit, a divine spark that endows them with a moral sense and an intellectual reach that the animals do not possess. It is the principal being, pre-existence to, and surviving the body, preserving its individuality. What is the origin of the spirit? Where is the starting point? Is it formed by the individualized intelligence principle? Is it a mystery that would be useless to search out, and regardless which, as we have said, we can only construct theories? What is constant and what stands out to reason and experience at the same time is the survival of the spirit, the preservation of its individuality after death, its ability to evolve, its happy or unhappy state in proportion to its advancement on the path of good, and all the moral truths that are a consequence of that principle. As for the mysterious connections between humans and animals, that, we repeat, is God's secret, like many other matters whose current understanding holds no importance for our advancement, and on which it would be useless for us to dwell. So that was a lot, so let's quickly go back to where we were talking about. So they're talking about how, so we started with, so humans are definitely different from all these other generic animals. And why? It's because humans were given a soul, or given a spirit, and that's what sets us apart from just this generic intelligence that the animals have. And we're able to, with our spirit, we're able to preserve our individuality and preserve what we learn and to survive the physical body. And so that's what sets us apart from the animals and makes us different than just being thrown into the category of animals. But they said again, but what is the origin of spirits? What's the starting point? All these things we have theories about them, but right now we don't have the knowledge to comprehend that, and that's still one of, let's say, God's secrets that we don't know yet. And we don't need that to advance. We'll still be able to advance without knowing that, but it's not our time to know that or to understand that. But what is important to keep in mind is that we do have our individuality after death, and we have the ability to evolve, to get better, and that depending on how much we evolve, depending on if we're on the good path or the bad path, we're going to have those consequences. We're going to be happy or we're going to be unhappy based on what we do, on our own consequences with our free will. So even though the connection between humans and animals is still God's secret and we only have theories about it, there are some other things that's more important for us to focus on, such as that humans have the ability to evolve, so let's try to evolve ourselves. So not only have we reached the end of this chapter, but we have also reached the end of part 2 in the book. So now we just reached part 3, where we'll be talking about moral laws. So we talked a lot about spirits and spiritual life and origins and stuff like that, but now we're going to be talking about moral laws. And when we were talking about, we need to evolve, we need to get better, we're going to talk about how we can do that and ways that we do evolve and ways that we can get better. But we'll start that off next week. But before we leave off today, I'd like to read our message from the Daily Book of Positive Quotations for today's date, January 23rd. This one's titled, Laughing in Adversity. Life does not cease to be funny when people die, any more than it ceases to be serious when people laugh. How can we laugh and have fun when so many bad things are going on around us? Isn't it wrong to enjoy ourselves when others are going through difficult times? Laughter is a gift that can help bring us through difficult times. We shouldn't be ashamed of smiling when life seems bleak. Laughing may not solve my problems today, but it may very well help me cope with them. I'm Bia, and this is Cardiac Radio for Teens. Thank you all for listening.
This has been Cardiac Radio for Teens. Thank you all for listening.